ma'am.
I want to welcome everybody here. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. If you're guests, we will invite you back next month. We hope you enjoy yourself. If you're members, thank you for coming every time and supporting our club. We appreciate it. I'd like to welcome Pastor Asbury. Pastor Asbury, would you like to come, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this gathering tonight. Father, I thank you for each person that's here. Lord, we just proclaim that you're the one and only true God. We give you all the glory. Lord, I ask that, Holy Spirit, that you come and just come and just overpower this meeting tonight, Lord. Father, we just ask that you lead and you guide, that you bless each person, bless the speakers, Father. And Lord, we just ask that everything that we do and everything that we say tonight give glory to you above all things. Lord, I ask that you bless each person that's here. And Father, we just ask that help us to love one another, Lord. Father, I ask that you forgive us when we fail you, in so many ways. And Father, we just declare tonight that you are the only one true and God, that we are not God, but you are. And so, Father, I ask that you just bless this time that we have together. And thank you for the privilege to come together to uplift our community, Father. Lord, we love you. We lay these prayers at your feet tonight, and we say thank you in advance for answered prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Let's pledge allegiance to our nation's
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now to our state's flag. Honor
The Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I would like for all our veterans and persons to stand. We always want to respect those guys that do all the work. I still have it in waiting for confirmation for our speaker next month. So we definitely get that in time for everybody to know what it's going to be. So we'll be watching Facebook and especially the Hood County Republican Conservatives Facebook page, and you'll find out who that's going to be. Okay, so we had some really good success in July 4th parade. If we want to brag a little, Hood County Republican Club / conservatives have entered into 6 of the July 4th parades, and we have taken home trophies and a blue ribbon out of 4. So I think we can really recognize this year. We're especially recognized because we had the best float in the July 4th parade. So we want to kind of show it to you because it really deals with what we're talking about tonight. And my computer's a little slow this time. First, we're going to start out with what it takes to build a float, and these are some of the things that the people building the float start with. And I mainly wanted to bring this one up because you really get a good look at what Jane Vernon painted for us. This is remarkable.
Wow.
That she did such a detail of Independence Hall. And we felt like this was the float this year because of the 250th anniversary. We thought this went well. And this is the float as it's put together. We got it pretty nice. And that, you see this is 14 foot of brick wall that Jane painted for us for many hours and many hours that she spent. Oh, it's gonna be like this. And of course, we did have Miss Liberty in the parade. The kids get a kick out of our elephant. And there's our founding father.
this year, but if it was a group effort. So I want to start out with, it always starts at the bottom and goes up to the top, right? So the very first thing we had to do was find a trailer. So we looked and we looked and we looked and we finally found one. Our chairman, Greg Harrell, gave us a great trailer to start with. Next thing we needed was a theme, and we have a member of ours, James Walls, that came up with the initial idea, and then we built off of that. And then you have to go to getting the building materials and stuff to do it. And we have Tim Bolton. He's the one that cut out the front of the Independence Hall for us.
Wow.
All right. And then you have, and I'm going to brag a little, then you have my husband, which was the builder of all of the support system.
Wow.
And he had help from a couple of people, Roger Lewis, which was Kim Lewis's husband, here at the club. And we had Coach and Crotton come and help us, or help Don finish that out. Then you had our founding fathers, which we had James Williamson was John Hancock, and we had Fred Santiago was Benjamin Franklin, and we had James Walls was Jefferson.
Woo!
So we had a really good.
That was fun. Did you see it?
So then you had Kim Lewis and myself were the administrators. We got for the club to oversee from the club side of it. So that's our July 4th parade. We're very happy about how tonight parade. Thanks. Can you get the lights back on? Next, HCRC wants to ask Nikki Sobchak to come up and talk to us a little bit about the data center issue, that the signatures and things, the petition that they turned into the city and where that's going or not, and see what's actually going on and what she's going to require from us going forward. Okay?
So I'm a member of the Granbury Grassroots group that's been block walking all over the city of Granbury, collecting signatures on petitions from dissatisfied residents. We've knocked over 1,500 doors. We've talked to people. I have to say it's been the most refreshing thing I've ever done, even in triple digits, because I've gotten to see that we are all united. It doesn't matter what social sphere we're in or what political leaning. Everybody agrees it's a 98-2 issue. People are fed up. They're fed up with the data centers being shoved down their throats. They're fed up with non-transparency in government, gaslighting. They're fed up. So we collected way more than enough signatures. We followed the rules. We submitted them, and today was the deadline for the city secretary to submit them to council for their own charter. And we were expecting shenanigans, but we weren't quite prepared for what came out today. City has made up some new rules, and they followed those rules and invalidated the petition, even though their charter doesn't allow them to do that. So we're evaluating next steps with attorneys, and we're repurposing our fundraising Give, Send, Go, which you can go to GranburyGrassroots.com or .org and click on the fundraising tab to donate to help us with legal fees, because we're dealing with some legal issues that we're going to have to challenge. The other petitions that we submitted were citizen drafted initiatives. We need about 50 more signatures from city voters on those to get them through over the threshold. Once we do, we will submit them, and the city will have to either vote to approve them as written or put them on the ballot for the city at large to vote on. So we're pretty excited about those. One of our petitions actually just went to the Planning and Zoning Commission last month and was unanimously voted up for approval. It's going to council on August 4th. So we'll be hoping that the council does the right thing and approves it. City staff drafted an alternative version that does not protect county people at all. So we're hoping that the council will not choose that version. We want people to show up August 4th and encourage council to support the citizen drafted version. If they don't, we're still going to submit the petition with the signatures. I don't know what else. Did I miss anything, Janet? Oh, the other ordinance initiative is economic development, because we feel like economic development has been the tool that has promoted a lot of the backroom deals and the shenanigans. So we're proposing a cap on city and economic development deals for projects that exceed $40 million without without voter approval. So billionaires don't need welfare. If they want tax incentives, then the city should ask us if we even want the project here in Granbury to justify a 60% tax abatement for 10 years on a project that nobody wants is a little bit unsettling. So that's where we're at. Again, we want mass turnout at the August 4th council meeting, 6 p.m. City Hall. And if you want to donate to the legal fees to help us, 26 volunteers gave up hundreds of hours in triple digits to get those signatures. We did everything by the books, and the city is trying to pretend they have some latitude to disqualify them. So we need an attorney fast.
Does anybody have any questions for Nikki before she goes? Anybody have a question for Nikki?
August 4th.
That's the date.
August 4th, that's a statement.
Yeah, that wasn't a question. You're right.
You have a question?
No, I said that wasn't a question. It's fine. She didn't make a joke with me.
I would like to know the evidence on it.
Okay, and speaker is, you all know him well. He's our constitutional director.
Expert.
Alright, so I was actually having a conversation with our chairman this morning, and this has happened to be, it relates to my talk tonight. Now, most of this group knows the answer, but for those of y'all that don't know the answer, some of y'all can help me with this. Where in the Constitution is separation of church and state?
No.
Nowhere.
It's not in there. That's right. Does anybody remember where it does come from?
A letter.
A letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Granbury Baptist Association.
No.
Or Danbury. A little ways off. Danbury Baptist Association. And he was talking about the wall separation between church and state, and that was actually a one-way wall, not a two-way wall. If you look at it, what he was saying is that the government is not supposed to establish a church religion. And I think that has been the basis for a lot of people to say that we're not a Christian nation. That we weren't founded on Christian principles, and that God has no business in our government. We've heard all those statements over the past generation, no doubt, right? How factual is that? No, it's not. It's not at all. And so, I mean, let's look at the opening of the Declaration of Independence, right? I mean, unanimous declaration of the 13th United States of America, when the course of human events it becomes necessary for the one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assemble among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal sanctions which, what? The laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them. Now, does that sound like an atheist statement? Not at all. Matter of fact, even in the Articles of Confederation, which we're not serving under, but these were our founders that created it, and this was in 1781, it starts off, and whereas it hath pleased the great governor of the world. Now, who is the great governor of the world? God. Once again, we are not an atheist nation. And here's one that I just recently learned about, and kind of got excited when I heard this one. Well, I had never heard this before. The Treaty of Paris, which is when the revolution finally ended, which was in 1783, it starts off, in the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. Trinity. Now, we can talk about, okay, the Texas Constitution says that there are no religious tests provided that we acknowledge a supreme being. Okay, and y'all remember that? That's in our Texas Constitution. We're supposed to acknowledge a supreme being being elected official in the state of Texas, which means, technically by our own Constitution, an atheist atheist cannot legally hold office in the state of Texas.
Wow.
But that is acknowledging a supreme being. And some might argue that, well, that doesn't necessarily mean our God. That doesn't mean the Christian God. But when you hear the phrase, the undivided Trinity, how many other religions have an undivided Trinity? Are we getting a little more specific about what our nation was founded on? We are, okay, and so, no religious test. We see that in the U.S. Constitution. No religious test. However, many of our founding, 9 out of the 13 regional states had some form of official Christian denomination. Many of them required a statement of belief in God, belief in divine inspiration of Scripture, or explicit profession to a Christian faith to even hold office. So there were actually states that required a denomination. So that kind of goes to our 10th Amendment, right? Where the states have rights. So the federal government could declare a state religion, but at our founding, the colonies or the states could. And I don't say that to try and promote that we should have a state-based religion. We should not. I think one of the reasons we left England was because we were kind of being forced to be part of a single church, right? But I say that to say, even though they were all declaring different denominations for their states, they were all Christian faiths.
That's right.
To say that we are not a Christian nation, I think, is denying our history. Whether you like it or not, it is part of our history. And I think we need to become more aware of our history. And like I said, I got really excited listening to wall builders when I learned about the Treaty of Paris, something that I probably should have known years ago. But as I mentioned many times before, I don't consider myself a constitutional expert. I'm a scholar. I'm learning. I'm becoming educated every day. And that's why I get up here and talk every month, because I want everybody to become more informed about our great nation and our Constitution. Because our Constitution, I have read off several quotes that back this, but I think, was it Hamilton? Who said that our Constitution is completely, now I'm going to get messed up on my own quotes, I didn't write them down, wholly inadequate for anyone other than a Christian nation. So what does that say about the Quran or Sharia law, right? Which Sharia law, we're not supposed to have multiple laws, right?
Right.
So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, but I just want to give you some reinforcement that we are a Christian nation, and there are many, many places you can look. Look at many of the quotes from our founders. You will see that we are, no doubt, founded and grounded on a belief in God.
Amen. That's true.
Praise God that we live in Texas.
Amen.
Hold on a second, hold on, get this in my computer. I think I'm going Stop it, Jim.
You trying to get it out?
Yeah, I think I got it. It's not really
Okay.
So each month, because we had our wonderful great flip, which is cheap. And then the other things that we do sponsor and do here and just different things we do for the club here, we pass a basket and ask you to put whatever you have in your pocket, little, small, little big, whatever you feel like, and that's how we support our club. So the guys will be passing that around. While they're passing that around, Jan's going to go down and we've got a couple of
ticket needed to die.
This is a great 250th anniversary patio.
Okay, that is a surprise.
We'll shuffle these out. These two come out the same. 454. Steve on in. This is the big screen. That one is a guy's thing. Well, you got a little bit, I guess, if you were in cars. So this is a expandable light that you can expand from one side of your hood to the other. So that when you're checking anything under the hood, and that you have a lit up place to work. So, and it's rechargeable. So it looks like it's pretty neat. I don't know if you can see the picture. Expands that whole hood.
You are listening.
Okay, the last one is 250th anniversary hat. So pretty cool for this year. And again, donated by our TV chair. 458. Okay, Jan.
Look at that. That's a sheep. Oh, no, I said rock.
So, who's sitting back there? 10. Have to lower some of the lights, not all of them, so he can see his movements. And they can see his movements. And now you get in there, I think there's only that one.
Whoa, good luck with that.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is introduce our speaker tonight, which is, I think most of you know, Brandon Hall. He's our representative at the school board of the state of Texas. And I know a lot of things have been going on down there, and so we thought Brandon would come and kind of fill us in and give us an update on all that. Thank you, Brandon.
All right, we can actually start off. We can get the lights just all the way up. That'd be perfect. My name is Brandon Hall, and I am your State Board of Education member here for District 11. So I'm so excited to be in Hood County today. And I'm going to actually start off. So I'm a Baptist preacher. And so I always start off, if I'm going to do a talk or preach a sermon, just like any Baptist preacher, I'm going to start off with something funny. And I think that's good in politics because I think things get a little tense in politics sometimes. So I think it kind of gets everybody loosened up. And I heard a story about a man who he had a son, and his son was getting a little bit older, and he was a little bit worried about how his son might turn out. He was concerned about which direction and path he'd take in life. And so he decided to set up a test for his son, just to see kind of which direction he was going to head. And he said, I'm going to set up a table. My son's upstairs. I'm going to set up a table downstairs and let my son come down. And I'm going to put some things out on the table. And whatever my son immediately chooses or walks up to, whenever he comes down the stairs, I think that will show me kind of where his interests are. And so he said, you know what? I want to see if maybe my husband, my son will be, maybe a successful businessman. And so he puts out a stack of money on the table. So if he comes down and chooses this stack of money, then I'll know where his interests lie. And then he said, I'm a little concerned that he might take the wrong direction in life. So I'm going to put a bottle of liquor on the table and see if my son comes down and chooses this bottle of liquor, then I'll know, he's headed in the wrong direction. Got to do something. He said, I'm also concerned my son may be a womanizer. So I'm going to put out a picture of a beautiful woman on the table. And if he heads straight for that picture, then I'll know that my son's headed in the wrong direction. And he said, I'm also, hopeful maybe my son might actually pursue becoming a man of God, going into the ministry. So he puts a Bible down on the table to see if maybe his son will choose that. And he calls his son downstairs, and the boy walks up to the table, picks up all 4 of them, and becomes a politician. But I'm so glad to be with you. I have my wife here with me. They're in the back, Ashley. And so Ashley, I think a lot of y'all know Ashley, but Ashley is pregnant with our first. And so they're looking forward to that. They're probably here in a little less than a month. And so it's very exciting. And, it makes all of this a lot more personal for me, serving on the State Board of Education. And, gives me a personal stake in what happens. And so I want to kind of go through some of what I want to cover with you today is a little bit about what the State Board of Education does. Because I get calls for all kinds of stuff. And I'm always happy to take calls from constituents and try to help, point people in the right direction. But I will get calls saying, hey, the bathroom in my child's school is broken. And I'm happy to help point those people in the right direction. But I have no direct authority over the bathrooms in the local school. And I get a lot of calls like that, so I think most people really don't know what the State Board of Education does. Generally, it operates in obscurity, which I don't think is a good thing. I think we need to know what's going on because as you're going to see from some of these things I'm going to show you, it's a pretty important body that makes some pretty important decisions. And so, perfect, okay. Sounds good. Get going on this new microphone. So, really what I would start with is that the State Board of Education will approve content standards, or will approve what are called the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And so those are the TEKS, they're often called. Those are the standards that our textbooks are based on. So those are what our students are going to be learning on a day-to-day basis. And that's a pretty big part of the job. That's something we spend a lot of time on. That's something that you've been hearing probably a little bit about this year. For this year, we're doing social studies TEKS for the first time in a while. And so we're going to cover that sort of in the second half of my presentation here today. But the social studies TEKS are, they've been very controversial because we're talking about what the students are going to learn in history and all of the social studies. And so those are kind of the standards that we approved. And those are what the textbooks are going to be based on. Those are what the teachers are going to be teaching. And then the students will be tested on those standards. So if you've seen the STAR test, don't chase me out because we have no direct authority over the STAR test either. But the STAR test is actually based on, that's more of a legislative issue, but it is actually based on the standards that we set. So if we say teach this at this grade level, it's going to end up in that STAR test. And then our publishing companies, they're going to base their textbooks off of that. We also do have a role in improving what we call high quality instructional materials. And so that would be, your textbooks that you actually see in the classroom. The legislature gave the State Board of Education new authority in that area. And so it's based on House Bill 1605. We have that high quality instructional materials list. So if the State Board of Education approves a new instructional material, there's a financial incentive where schools can unlock new funding to be able to purchase that material. And you've probably heard of Bluebonnet Learning, that's sort of part of that. And they get an additional financial incentive for using Bluebonnet Learning. And then additionally, based on a law passed by the legislature, if we put something on the not approved list, then it's not able to be taught in Texas public schools. So currently, we don't have anything on the not approved list. We definitely should, I'm sure, have some that are sort of substandard. But we will go through, we have rubrics that we go through and we test them. All these instructional materials, they go through kind of a year-long review process. And part of that is our people that we're able to appoint as your SBOE members, so we can appoint teachers, and it's extremely important that we pick the right people to be able to do those reviews. And so they will spend, months sort of going through these instructional materials and seeing, are they rigorous enough for our students? Are they suitable according to Texas law? Are they free from all of the things the legislature says, we're not able to talk about, like critical race theory, DEI, sexually explicit material? We're screening all of these materials to see that if the State Board of Education approves one, we can say, okay, this is suitable for use. It's going to be rigorous for our students, and that's why the legislature has given local ISDs a financial incentive to be able to approve those things. We also, you probably have seen one of the big areas of authority that the State Board of Education has is approving new charter schools. So we don't have any regulatory authority over charter schools other than the curriculum standards that we set. They also have to follow, just like regular public schools. And charter schools are public schools as well. Anybody can go to a charter school. And so we also, everything that we set as far as curriculum standards, they also have to go by. They also have to follow state law. There are some differences, but usually charter schools have a little bit more of a rigorous standard that they're judged by. If a charter school fails 3 years in a row, the charter school has to close, right? So we know ISDs, so we have some struggling ISDs, and there's mechanisms in place to hold them accountable, but they wouldn't necessarily close. And so if anything, the standards are a little bit more strict on charter schools, but we approve new ones. And for me, I think that's an important part of the job because I believe in putting as many high-quality options in front of parents as possible. I don't want parents to be in the driver's seat. I believe that the rights of parents are sovereign over their children. I think that parents know what's best for their children. And I think for those of us who make decisions in the public education world, I think we need to remember that parents are our #1 stakeholders. And so, but when you get to Austin, there are other interests that are whispering in your ear. And so you'll have, lobbyists, which I was surprised when I came to the State Board of Education. I was surprised that we actually have lobbyists that come and get paid, just like the legislature, to try to steer us in one direction or another. And so you'll find out there are tons of different interests. Because especially some of our decisions based on textbooks, there's millions of dollars obviously that to be made, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, they will pay lobbyists to come to work. So we always have people, trying to steer you in one direction or another. But I think it's important that we always remember, who should really be in the driver's seat, who we should really be listening to, and who really knows what's best for their own children, and that's our parents. And so I also believe that, you may be a grandparent, your children may have graduated a long time ago, and are no longer in school, but I believe that every taxpayer is also a stakeholder in all of this because you're the one funding it all. And so I definitely try to listen to my constituents. I try to make sure that your voice doesn't get drowned out by all of the lobbyists and special interests. And all of the lobbyists and special interests in Austin would tell you that. This doesn't always make me popular with them, but that's okay. When I sit in that seat and when I'm at the dais, I always try to remember that I have 2 million people back home, especially those of you in Hood County, and I try to remember what would the patriots in Hood County expect? What do they want me to be fighting for? And so when you see those videos on social media where I'm asking tough questions and taking tough stands, that's because I know that that's what you expect, and I know that it is. And so we also, on the State Board of Education, set graduation requirements. So what is required for a high school senior to walk across that stage. We appoint school board members for special reservation districts. So one example of that would be a military base. A lot of them have their own school district. Boys Ranch has their own school district, and so we appoint all of those school board members. Also, we oversee the permanent school fund, which is an extremely important part of the job that we have. And the permanent school fund in Texas is sitting over $65 billion today. And so there's a corporation that sort of runs that and makes some of the investment decisions, but we have oversight in everything that they do. And so that's another part of the job that I take very seriously. I'm going to talk a little bit about, before I get ahead of myself too much, I'm going to talk a little bit about my why, kind of what motivated me to run for State Board of Education in the first place. And some of you may know this story because I know a lot of y'all pretty well, but I'm sure there's some newer folks in the room. And, for me, I'm in full-time Christian ministry. And so, a lot of people would be like, why would you run for State Board of Education? You've never been a teacher, all of those things. And for me, it started when I was actually preparing for the ministry. I was at Bible college, and I went to Bible college in Chicago, which I know is absolutely crazy. But I actually picked it on purpose because I really wanted to learn how to work with people, and I really wanted to help people who were having a tough time. And I thought, what better place to go and find lots of people who need help than Chicago. And this Bible college that I went to, they had a program where you could earn college credit for working in the ministries that they had in the inner city of Chicago. And I was blown away just being a country boy myself and going to the big city was like a whole new world for me. And I was blown away by the things that I saw. And when you look at the schools in some of those neighborhoods, and I worked almost exclusively in some of the toughest neighborhoods in the city, down on the south side, a neighborhood called Little Village, and some other really tough neighborhoods down there. And it was amazing to me to see the schools there, of course, just really afflicted by drugs and gangs and violence. And those children that live in those neighborhoods, that's what they have to go through on a daily basis when they go to school. They have to be harassed by the gangs as they're walking, back and forth from school every day. A lot of them fall into that. Of course, they're very high risk to do that. And our ministry, we actually had a Christian school that was just for those inner city kids. And so we would help that we would work with, usually it's single moms. So most of the time in these neighborhoods, these are kids that have a dad in the home, almost in every case of the families that I work with. And so we work with that mom and, help her, present the school to her, and, help her get the kids enrolled. And then we would also help the mom raise money so that her kids can have that opportunity, because it's usually something they weren't able to do for themselves. And I know for some of the people that I work with, some hardworking single moms that were also, under the burden of insane Chicago property taxes. And so they're paying for, the public school system that was in a really tough position. And then they're trying to send their kids to private school because they want better opportunities. They want to improve the odds of their child's success. And so they're having to pay into both systems. And that's really where, why I'm a big fan of school choice, because I think that the parents' money should be able to follow their students and open up opportunities for them. And I saw that happen because we were able to work with those families and help them raise money. And I saw, it was just amazing. It was night and day. When you would put those children in an uplifting, safe environment with good academics and give them a chance, they would thrive. They would just be doing so much better. And I can look at a lot of them today. And, when I first got there, a lot of them were small, a lot of them were in elementary. And today, some of them have kids of their own. And some of them, I think of one kid that I was able to work with named Memo, and I worked with him for, a number of years. And he got into this school. He was in a really tough neighborhood, tough situation. The gangs would try to recruit him. And he was able to graduate from this school. And today, he is going into full-time Christian ministry. He's at the Bible college, studying to be in ministry.
That's awesome.
He has a family of his own. And so, for me, that's what education is about. It really is. And I know there's a lot of issues that we engage in, a lot of political debates. But for me, when I'm able to visit schools, even here in the district, I'm able to go to Fort Worth ISD and go to some of those really struggling schools. I see the kids there. And, many of them are struggling, and I try to keep them top of mind in everything that I do. They are really my why. And of course, my own child is going to be a big part of my why now. But I want them to receive a world-class education. I want them to have every opportunity. I want Texas to be number one. And that's what really motivates me, is that we provide that world-class education I think our students deserve. And we have to do it as well. And one of the big reasons that I wanted to get involved is we have to do it in a safe environment for the kids as well. We have to protect them. Because don't let anybody gaslight you. Right? I'm not saying that every school is the same. I'm not saying every situation is the same. But there are some very negative agendas in the state of Texas that are coming after our children. And I see it, pretty much on a daily basis being the State Board of Education. Just having parents reach out to me. It wasn't that long ago that a picture came out of El Paso Independent School District of the superintendent and another administrator. It was just a picture they posted on Facebook. There was nothing behind the picture except a Pride Progress flag was on the wall in that school behind those administrators. And then, of course, there was a lot of pushback on that, and they deleted the picture. But, we see things like that really all over the state of Texas. And sometimes even back here in District 11, we'll see things like that. But, I think of another school district, which is Austin ISD. And, our tax dollars are going to a school that has a week-long Pride celebration because Of course, quote unquote Pride Month is in the month of June, which is outside of the school year. So Austin ISD has their own Pride Week that's back in March to make sure that they don't miss it. And they spend that entire week indoctrinating kids. And Austin ISD will even take buses and take them to the city of Austin's Pride Parade. These are the things some of our tax dollars are going to in the state of Texas. And I think that those precious children, who their innocence is being violated by those negative agendas, I think somebody needs to stand up for them. Somebody who's not afraid of the lobbyists, in Austin, somebody that's not afraid of the pushback from the left-wing mob that you get when you stand up to these things, because it is absolutely happening. And if anybody doubts that, I invite you to come to me after the meeting, reach out to me. I will show you numerous examples of this happening. So that's a big reason why I'm involved as well. And it was that experience in Chicago that really got me interested in education. It really showed me how important education is. And so I've been blessed to serve, obviously, for the last little over a year. And I have learned so much. And, I knew going in that there was a lot that I needed to learn about public education. So it's been like drinking from a fire hose. But I feel like I've applied myself to that job 100% and just trying to learn every single thing that I can. And I feel like on your behalf, that over the last year and a half, I can honestly look back and say we have been really effective, and I think even extraordinarily effective for being a freshman board member. We've been able to, I think, have a big part in a lot of the great wins at the state board of education. And I appreciate that. So, the dynamics of the State Board of Education, what's it like? And y'all hear a little bit about this, but on the board, we have 15 members who represent districts, obviously, around the state. Our district has 6 counties, Hood County being one of them, kind of based around the Fort Worth area, Parker County, where I live. And each one of us have about 2 million constituents. So it keeps me very, very busy trying to keep up with this constituent contact that may come from lots of different people. And I'll have you know, because some of you are probably like, oh, you're a little slow to answer my emails sometimes. During the board week this last time, I had over 6,000 emails, just kind of right around that week. And so sometimes, I have no paid staff to help me go through those emails. And so sometimes it takes me a little while to get back to some of those things. So we have a lot of constituent contact. But on the board, out of those 15 members, 10 of us are Republicans, and 5 of the board members are Democrats. And so the people of Texas have put Republicans firmly in control of the State Board of Education, right? I'm happy too. The problem is, though, right? This is not going to surprise you because we're talking about Boston here, but the problem is Republican priorities often struggle to pass on the State Board of Education. Now, if Republicans have 2/3 of the seats, what would we refer to that as? What kind of majority is that? Super majority, right? So if Republicans have a super majority, then Republican priorities should really just sail through the board. Conservative priorities and indoctrination should never slip through the board, any of those things, and yet we see some examples of this happening. And many times, I would say, since I've been there, I don't know, it's probably about 50-50 that the Democrats can find enough Republican votes to stop whatever we're trying to do, or to pass things that should never pass out of the State Board of Education. They need 3. So we could even lose 2 of the Republicans and we can still pass whatever we wanted. But many times the Democrats are able to find 3 or 4 people to go over and join them. So that's been a struggle. I can tell you that is going to improve because I think the people of Texas are waking up. They woke up in our district and you put somebody who's very conservative in office, being myself, and I think a lot of these other districts have also woken up. And so we have 4 new members who are coming onto the state, 4 new Republicans who are coming onto the State Board of Education. And I would say that they would be a lot more similar to myself than the people that they're replacing. So they're very strong, solid, grassroots conservatives, and I think that's amazing. I think they're going to serve the state of Texas very well. But some of the struggles, I'll go over a couple of them. We had a textbook last year. There was a course that came to us, which was a Native American Indigenous Studies course. And that's something that I don't believe in. The definition of critical race theory is viewing history through the lens of race, and just kind of focusing on that, looking at everything that happened in history through that lens. I think we should look at history, according to all perspectives, and according to the facts of what happened, not just that one singular thing. And so, of course, critical race theory, that's really what a lot of these ethnic studies courses are based on. It's just critical race theory. That's all it is. So I would never vote to approve one. I will always vote against them. But this Native American Studies course came to us, and in the textbook that came along with this course, there was a phrase in this textbook that said George Washington used terrorist tactics, and that's a quote, terrorist tactics, against the Iroquois nation. And also in the standards of this course, it said that we needed to teach students to do land acknowledgements. Do you know what a land acknowledgement is? That's where you say, we want to recognize that this is the ancestral homeland of such and such tribe. And what I would say is, which time period of history are you going to pick to do that, right? Because sure, that tribe may have, lived in that area at one point in time, but before them it was someone, before they came in and pushed the other tribe out, it was someone else. And then someone else came along behind them, and a lot of the land has changed hands many times, right? And of course, that's just something to promote a fallacy to our children. That's indoctrination, and it's promoting a fallacy to our children that they're living on stolen land, and they need to be, they need to feel guilty about that. Which I always find it really interesting, the stolen land fallacy, because according to left-wing logic, we have, if your family has lived in this country for 10 generations, you have no right to the land. You're living on stolen land. But, when someone immigrates here illegally, crosses the border and invades our country, after they've been here for 15 minutes, they have a right to stay. And so I just, I find that really interesting. But that was included in the standards of the course. And we could only find 5 votes against that course, so it passed 9-5. And so, that's one of the struggles that we've had on the board. There was, some textbooks last year that we got that were promoting, eating bugs and talking about how eating bugs is more ethical than eating meat. This is the state of Texas. We're the #1 cattle producing state in the country, right? And so that doesn't fly here, but it actually passed, believe it or not. And so I think we can find 3 votes against that. And, usually you can count on me to be within, if there's 3 of the most conservative members voting on something, I'll be one of those 3. Even if I was the only person, I would be, you pretty much know where I'm going to fall on these issues. And you can count on that. And I invite you, to watch the meetings, to attend whenever you can, to pay attention. And if you think that I'm stepping out of line, if you think that I'm not aligning with the conservative values of the district or your conservative values, call me out on it. We need that accountability in government. You should never trust a politician, not even me. And I'm trying to be more of a statesman than a politician. But you should hold your government officials accountable. And so when we came into the social studies TEKS revision process, those dynamics are very much at play in this process. So the dynamics we were talking about with Republicans not always falling in line with Republican priorities, we knew that was going to be a concern coming into the social studies TEKS debate. And so this is the first time that we revised social studies standards in 16 years in the state of Texas. And so, what we've been able to pass so far is it's a major overhaul, major revision. And, it's going to be in place for, of course, a generation of Texas students and 5.5 million students in the state of Texas. And, really, the basis or the groundwork of what we do could be in place a lot longer than that. So you can see, that is a very important process. That's going to be very impactful. And of course, in these social studies TEKS is what we're teaching about American history. What perspective are we going to look at American history from? And I think we should just teach factual history, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and just teach it as it happened. And I think when you do that, it's a remarkable story that we have, right, as Americans. It really is. And I think, we haven't always been perfect, of course, but really, when you look at the arc of American history and what it's resulted in today, the greatest, freest, most prosperous nation in the history of the world, and that's for everyone who lives here. It's been incredible. It took us, a little bit to end up there, but, it's been incredible. And I think, American history, that's the story of who we are. That's our heritage. Our students need to understand, I think when we look at this social studies process, our students need to understand that our heritage is their birthright, right? And that's who they are as well. And it's our job to pass that down to them in a way that is factual, right? In a way that it is positive about America, in a way that promotes our founding fathers as titans of history, not as villains.
Right.
But the problem is, a lot of people that are involved, a lot of the education interests, they don't see it that way. Now, I serve on the board with Democrats, right? And the Democratic Party has taken a very radical direction. And we see that reflected in the social studies process. We had a member say, and I quote, "There is nothing exceptional about America or Texas."
Wow.
That came from one of our Democrat members. We also had a Democrat say that, quote, "The founding fathers engaged in villain-like behavior," right? And so that's what we're up against, really. And then, of course, we have the historical revisionists. And the historical revisionists, they have been at work, trying to mold our history for decades and decades in the state of Texas and across America. They have taken out, and I'm so glad, Constable London, where is he at? And he stepped out. Okay, I'm so glad that he was here, to lay that out, because really a big part of our heritage has been the Christian roots that we have as a nation. 56 out of 60 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Christians, right? So the vast majority of our founding fathers, they had such a big influence, and that's been steadily taken out of our American history. And American history is been taught in a large part in a negative manner, like the story of America, is something to be ashamed of. And really, when we teach our students, that you are the people who, you're the children of the revolution, a ragtag army of farmers and blacksmiths and laborers who took on, the most powerful empire in the world at that time and won. You're a child of that, of the revolution. You're a child of the Alamo and the great story there, the victory at San Jacinto. You're a child, your people won 2 world wars back to back. We put a man on the moon. We defeated communism in the Cold War. The story of American history is an inspiring story. And and when we teach it to our students, it uplifts them. We have a lot, actually, that divides us right now as a country. We have a lot of, just issues that we're going back and forth on. But American history is something that should unite all of us, because it's like, that's our story. That's who we are as a people. That's something that will uplift and inspire our children. And so it's really important when we're coming into this social studies teach debate, we have to play defense to keep out, all of the critical race theory, all of the negative news on American history. And that's something that we have to, a big part of being successful in that is just staying in the room. Because we will, some of y'all have been up to the board, I think, here. But when we're at the board, sometimes we'll be in that room from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. the next day. And so we're voting on hundreds and hundreds, and really over the course of the week, thousands of amendments to these social studies standards. And the Democrats will come in with hundreds of amendments. And of course, they want to make American history just all about race, all about divisive political issues, not telling the great story of our country, but focusing 90% on all of the negative things. Have anything negative ever happened in American history? Of course, we're people, right? But what matters is, do you want to put 90% of the emphasis on that, or do we want to tell the whole story? When you tell the whole story, it's pretty incredible. And so we have to fight just hundreds of amendments. And our problem is, we will have some of the Republicans that will come over with the Democrats and join them on some of those amendments. And so myself and a group of the conservatives on the board, we came out with, before the last meeting, we're going to vote no on every single Democratic amendment, right? And think about it. And think about it. These are people who have already said, from the get-go, they've committed, we're voting against the draft of the teams. We're going to vote against the whole thing. So why would I entertain allowing somebody to make changes to a document that they have already said they're going to vote no? Also, a lot of these amendments are full of critical race theory, full of indoctrination, and so I can say, we were able to hold off a lot of those. A few of them slipped through. Nothing really super bad slipped through. We were able to kill pretty much everything that was destructive to the draft that we had. But that was a big battle. And again, that would go sometimes early into the morning. But we were able to do a lot of positive things as well. We were able to put the factual Christian roots and foundations of the country back in. And so, and one of the ways we were able to do that, a lot of y'all know, in this process of writing the standards, they're not written by State Board of Education members. We have a panel of content advisors, and so you have 10 people that are chosen by the State Board. And so we each get to appoint someone, and our pick from District 11 was David Martin. And a lot of y'all know I was very thankful to have him a part of this process. Of course, he's an expert. He has one of the largest collections of primary sources in the entire country. If you go out to wall builders, he's It seems like every other time I talk to him, he's at some auction buying some letter from the founding father. He goes directly back to it. When you do that, you see, there's a lot of things that they haven't wanted to talk about our history. There's a lot of things that have been taken out. And so when I talked to him, he said these are probably the best social studies standards that we've had in the state of Texas since the 1970s.
Wow.
And so I think that's a huge accomplishment. And so we're going to talk about the influence of the Great Awakening on American history. One of the people who said, and some of y'all may have seen that movie that came out recently, but one of the people who said that it was inseparable from the movement for independence and the revolution was one of the founding fathers that maybe we wouldn't consider to be a Christian, even though he's somebody who believed in God and all of those things, which is Benjamin Franklin, right? We might consider him to be one of the least Christian founding fathers, and he said, you really couldn't separate what happened in the Great Awakening from the movement for revolution and independence. He said, it was very vital to that. He talked about how, just walking through the streets, you would hear families just coming from the open window, singing hymns. It was just everywhere, the Christian influence on the country. And of course, coming out of the Great Awakening, that great revival that we had sweep through the country, people started to see themselves not as subjects, but people said, our king is Jesus, and our rights, they come from God and not from the king. That's really what started that movement for revolution. Also, the British. If we're going to go back to those primary sources, the British were giving pastors the credit for stirring up the people for revolution. They were saying, if we could just get these pastors to stop, if we could just silence them, we'd be okay, because that's really where the revolutionary sentiment is coming from, is out of the pulpits. And that was a group of pastors that we refer to as the Black Robe Regiment. We're going to talk about them once again in American history. They're pretty important. We're going to say, about the Pilgrims. They came here, especially over on the Mayflower. They came here, not just for religious freedom, not, just generally, but they actually came here to advance the Christian faith. You know why? Because that's what they said in the Mayflower Compact. And so our students need to know really what that original history was. And because we had conservatives fighting in Austin, because we heard from a lot of y'all in the emails that y'all sent, we were able to get a lot of that stuff passed. So we passed K through 8 social studies, and I'm very proud with the final set of teams that came out of that. We have to go back in September, and this is where I'm going to need you to email the board. Once again, go to the State Board of Education's website, SBOE.texas.gov, and you can pull up a list of all of the members, and you can email them, because we have high school social studies teams coming back up for a final vote, and so we're going to have to vote again on all these things. Now, as I'm kind of wrapping up, I'm going to go to questions here in just a second. Let me just check how I'm doing on time, because I'm going to save some of this for questions. And when did you go to wrap up? Sounds like a good job here, because it now depends on me, so they're making me the bad guy. But a lot of y'all saw that, of course, there was a big debate around Islam. And, a lot of my critics, a lot of the critics of the State Board of Education, the conservative members of the SBOE, they will say, they're just making a big deal about this Islam thing, and it really wasn't an issue, it wasn't a factor, there was no geeks that were influenced by Islam or anything like that. And so I'll just tell you the actual story of how the Islam issue really blew up at the State Board of Education, and it wasn't for me, I didn't start it. But I'm sitting in a meeting, and we're taking testimony from experts and from organizations and things like that, and I see on this list that the Council on American Islamic Relations is one of the groups that's coming in to give us a testimony. But the day before, I had seen in the news that Governor Abbott designated CARE, is what they call themselves, Governor Abbott designated CARE as a foreign terrorist organization. And so did Governor DeSantis in Florida. But get this is a group that's so radical that even the United Arab Emirates, a Muslim majority nation, has designated them as a foreign terrorist organization. Because they have just undeniable ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, to Hamas. They were named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial of terrorism financing. And if you look at the, if you want to see some of this, just go look at the governor's proclamation. He really lays it out point by point. And we can go on all night talking about people who have been, CARE executive directors or CARE board members. One of the guys is from Dallas. And he was sentenced to 65 years in prison for sending over $60 million, laundering over $60 million to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. and he's sitting in prison right now. He was from Dallas, and he was one of the founding board members for CARE Texas. And so that's why Governor Abbott, brought out the designation. I hope that President Trump, this is maybe another action item for you. You call the White House and ask President Trump, please give us a federal designation to designate CARE as a foreign terrorist organization. That will give us a lot more leverage to stop them from influencing what we're doing. But I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that, this foreign terrorist group is coming to speak to us. And so, I didn't know what else. And a lot of people think that I was, trying to just cause drama. And really, it wasn't. I just didn't know what else to do but to say, why are we letting these people speak? And so I asked that question when she came up to the microphone. I said, Mr. Chairman, why are we allowing a foreign terrorist organization to influence the social studies process in Texas? And why are we allowing them to speak if they're, designated, proven foreign terrorists? And so he said, well, they got into a whole thing with legal, and they're asking all the lawyers, and the lawyers said, we have to let them speak, which I totally disagree with. But they said, got to let them speak. They still, even though they have that designation and criminal ties with the organization, that individual person from the organization still has First Amendment rights. And so I said, okay, if you're going to let her speak, I'm not listening to it. And so I stood up and walked out of the room. Another board member, Julie Pickering, has joined me in walking out of the room, and we have done this 5 times now, 5 different meetings, because CARE keeps coming back. And so people are like, why are you so worried about radical Islam, and why are you so worried about CARE? Well, because they keep coming back, and they are really flooding the board. There was a time, when I looked out at this last meeting where we were taking some final votes on the social studies teams, and the room was literally half of the room was their people. I mean, they had busted in, a ton of people. I don't know exactly how many, but probably somewhere between 80 and 100 people from Houston, from Dallas, and also was able to get the lady who works for CARE. So what I'll do is when she has her little prepared remarks, I don't listen to prepared remarks from a terrorist organization. So, and I don't think that the person who represents you should give that listening ear. So I walk out, but then we have the opportunity to ask them questions. So I come back in, and one of the questions that I asked the lady who works for CARE, a lobbyist for CARE, is, have you worked with any of the members of this board, any of the Democrats on this board, to give them the amendments that, all of these amendments the Democrats are proposing to the teams? Did you give them any of their amendments? Have you been working with any of them? She said, yes, of course we have. And so, when people say that there's no possibility that they would have influence over these things, there's a huge possibility that they could if we don't stand up and fight it. And so that's why I've been working so hard to draw attention to that issue, because we had to stop it. And we had a lot of that influence. It was, really a lot to fight it off. And I've gotten, as you can imagine, when you stand up to these groups, when you stand up to Islam, you're going to get a ton of pushback. And there has been a lot. But you know what? We have to take a stand. We have to make sure that these negative forces are not influencing our children. And they absolutely want to. So we've had testifiers that have come in with CARE, people who have ridden the CARE bus, that have come in and defended Sharia law. Several of them at this last meeting came in and defended Sharia law. We had a lady come in and defend jihad, because that's something that we wanted to talk about in the teams, is that, Islamic caliphates had conquered Christian lands in the Middle East, and, if you look at Turkey, and these are Islamic caliphates coming in and conquering Christian lands, and they're motivated by the teaching of jihad in the Quran. I think our students need to understand that. So that made a lot of them upset. We had a lady come in and said, you really don't understand what jihad is. And she said, something like, I think everybody should engage in jihad. If you want to see exactly what she said, you can go to my Facebook page. And I posted the video there. And so I was like, I think this is a remarkable moment. So I called her back up and I was like, just to make sure that I heard you correctly, do you think that jihad is a negative thing? And she would not answer that question. She said, in fact, her answer to that question is, I can't answer that right now. I have to go back out and catch my bus to Dallas. And so, she lives not far away from us, defending jihad. Then we had another teacher come in, and she said, I'm a social studies teacher, and she said that if we do anything to try to, get rid of the influence of Islam in our teens, it's only going to help spread Islam. And she said this, and we need to be aware of this. She said, Islam is the fastest growing religion in Texas, the United States, in the world, right? And actually, there's a little bit of a veiled threat that she gave to the board. You can find that video on my social media. But actually, she's right. It is. And the influence is growing, and they tried really hard to influence the speech process. But I I'm very confident in that what we have passed so far has none of their influence. We were able to fight it all back. That was a big issue, and that's going to be a big issue going forward. And some people would say, well, they're a small percentage of the population. Well, the time to stop an invasion is before it's completed, before it's successful, right? And so, we have to stand up to these things now. We cannot allow it to come and take over. And, really, we're talking about world history for our public schools. We have 1,400 years of documented history that when Islam shows up on your doorstep, they do not show up to assimilate, they show up to take over. There's 1,400 years of history of that happening. And so I'm very confident, again, and just to kind of finish up that whole social studies conversation, it was a big battle. We had a lot of people trying to influence the board. But I'm just very thankful on the 250th anniversary of our country. We have America and Texas focused weeks where we're looking at everything not from a global perspective, but we're looking at it from our perspective as Americans and as Texans. And our students are going to see themselves as Americans and Texans first, not as global citizens. And so I'm very confident that we did that and that these teams are patriotic, that they promote the founding documents, the founding fathers, and that they teach a positive view of American history and American exceptionalism. We did that on the 250th anniversary.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'll finish with the literary works list. So this was another, and then we'll go to some questions. But the literary works list was another very big controversial issue because for the first time in the state of Texas, we will have a required, and basically what it is a required reading list for the entire state, where we say there are some works that our students need to know at each grade level. And so we have there were lots of good things. And part of the thinking here is we need to make sure that our students are learning the classics, because not in every school district, but certainly in many school districts, the classics have kind of been pushed aside a little bit for some modern works that are far more shallow than our classics. And oftentimes that's because of the social values that they promote, that were not promoted, of course, in our classical works. And so we want to make sure, okay, our students need to be reading these classical works that you grew up on. They're important for understanding Western civilization, for understanding our culture and our way of life as Americans. So we're reading the classics, Jane Austen, Shakespeare, all of those good things back. But we also said, you know what? We need to go back once again in the state of Texas and start teaching the best-selling book of all time. Key passages from that book. And what is that book? That's the Bible. Right? The Bible is the best-selling book of all time.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
And these key passages that we included on the literary works list, they are inseparable from our history, our laws as a state of Texas, our culture, and just really understanding the rest of our classical literature. The Bible is the most commonly referred to outside work in all of our classical literature by far, right? But even our founding fathers, as Constable London said, even our founding fathers, they reference the Bible 4 times more than any other source. So if you don't understand some of these key passages, you're not going to understand even popular culture has so many phrases, you don't even realize it. A lot of the things that we say come straight out of the Bible. How would you understand them? How are we going to understand Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail if you don't know anything about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel? Nebuchadnezzar. You're reading this letter, and he's comparing himself to those men and Daniel, and talking about courage and taking a stand. How would you understand what he's talking about if you didn't know those stories? And that's an important story out of American history. It's something that's commonly read in our schools, but you need to know what kind of goes along with that. You need to know the 23rd Psalm. The 23rd Psalm, just as a work of literature, the 23rd Psalm is the greatest poem ever written. And Americans have been reading and quoting the 23rd Psalm since the Pilgrims came off of the Mayflower.
That's right.
Used at funerals for 400 years. And just the incredible poetic language that's used there, and there's so many references to that culture. Students should know that passage.
That's right.
Students should know the Beatitudes. And I think these are things, of course, when we're looking at this, these are works of literature that have been foundational to Western civilization, to America, to the state of Texas. But also these are things that are not, what is controversial about teaching our students to treat people the way that you want to be treated? Hey, even love your enemies, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Right? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Those are things that will uplift our students. Those are things that can only help them. And they've been a part of our instruction in in our country, all the way up until it was arbitrarily taken out in the 1960s. And they said, just to make sure that we're fully secular, we want no Bible in the schools. And they took it out. And I think our students have been, they haven't received a complete education without it. You need those things to have a complete education, just to understand. Even if you don't, maybe even if it doesn't line up with your own beliefs, you need to know what's impacted the country that you live in and what's impacted our culture. And so I think those things are going to be so important to enriching our students' education in the state of Texas. I think we've also seen, taking the Bible out, that there is no such thing as just this void or the vacuum that they talk about when they say we want our schools to be secular, because somebody's values are going to fill that void, right? Now, our founding fathers said, our moral code that our law is based on comes from the Ten Commandments, comes from the Bible, right? And if you were to go to a Muslim country, their values come out of their religious beliefs as well. But you have to choose someone's religious beliefs. And today we have, what's really been filling the void is a lot of the woke leftism that has come in and started promoting values that are not Texas values. And so we need to say not everybody has to become a Christian, right? We're not establishing a state church or a state religion, but we need to recognize and understand that our laws in the state of Texas are based on the moral code found in the Bible. And so we're not going to be walking down the street, and we're not going to be arbitrarily excluding those things anymore. And that's about, with your instruction time in a public school classroom, it's about 25% of the instructional time is covered by this literary works list. So our local school districts, a lot of them, we're very concerned about having enough time to also for teachers to be able to put in things and their districts to cover things they felt like were important. So they still have time, but we have a common body of knowledge. We have a canon of literature in the state of Texas where no matter what district our students move to, they're going to know the works of Shakespeare. They're going to even read essays from Thomas Sowell and some of these key passages. And so I'm also very thankful for that list. That is a historic moment. That's the first time, really, in 63 years that the Bible is coming back into public school classrooms in the state of Texas.
That's good. It's awesome.
And so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and take some questions, and so I'd love to hear from you.
Brandon, could you enlighten us on how many other states follow our lead on this? Because I've heard different reports about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. It kind of depends on what we do as far as what the answer to that will be, but there's probably about at least 23 other states that tend to follow trends that Texas sets, especially with curriculum standards. So, yeah, in order to understand the curriculum standards that states set, you really have to understand the textbook publishing market, because, of course, money really drives a lot of this. And so our textbook publishers, it's interesting when I sit down with them, they will say, they'll tell me that in California has laws saying you must teach critical race theory, you must cover, sexual lifestyles, and all. They make them put some of that stuff in the curriculum. And in Texas, we have laws that say you're not allowed to cover any of that in the textbooks. And so really you have kind of two main markets, which is Texas and California, because we're the top two as far as student population. California is number one. And the state of Texas, we have, with our 5.5 million students, we're about 10% of all of the students in the country. So we're the second largest market for these textbooks. And so what tends to happen is a lot of the blue states will follow what California does very closely, and a lot of the red states tend to follow what Texas does very closely. And so what we're hoping, even with these social studies teams, we're hoping that sort of the outline of those things, that a lot of other red states are going to pick those up. And I think they will, because that's where the textbook market is headed. And then also, even with our literary works list, I think it would be, I think we're going to, hopefully we'll be a leader in the state of Texas in saying we're not going to arbitrarily exclude these things that need to be included anymore. And I think a lot of other states are going to follow us on that. So that's a great question, Bob. And Bob was actually at our last SBOE meeting, so he can confirm, some of these stories that I'm telling you. And he was there in his colonial officer's uniform, so it was very, very sharp.
Thank you. What's happening in the areas of mathematics and sciences?
That's a great question. I think with all of our teams, I think we've got a lot of work to do, areas where we can improve them. We have sort of cycles on the State Board of Education where we go through and review these teams. And so, of course, right now, we're on the social studies review cycle. We are approving textbooks for math and science. So we're working on kind of going back to the basics, especially with math, I would say, going back to the basics, getting getting away from a lot of the Common Core and the way that it complicate, a lot of our math. And so we're going back to more like old-fashioned instruction, the best that we can, and then we will take another crack at those standards here in the years to follow. I think our next review cycle will actually be science, I believe. So I haven't had an opportunity to tackle the science teams, but I think they're coming up very soon.
This moral statement, we talked to some friends and people that were immigrants and had to pass a test to become citizens. I think everyone in high school should have to pass that same test because it's amazing how many kids have no idea about our country and where it started.
Yeah, that was that exact conversation we had at the beginning of the whole social studies process, and so we wanted. I think we've included a lot of it, and I think when we go back to high school and we look at especially U.S. government in high school, we've had that exact conversation, and that is one of my priorities to see those same questions in our standards. And so that's a great point. I think we're not doing a good job teaching civics. I think we all agree on that. And I think in general with social studies, only half of our students across the state of Texas are proficient in social studies standards. So clearly what we're doing now is not working. And I think we've made a big improvement that will help, and that's something I'll tackle when we go back to high school. Yes, Jessica.
Hey, I just want to thank you for carrying our concerns and fighting for our kids. But I want to ask you, what is the best way that you can recommend for parents and community members to get involved and help you in this way?
That is a great question. I would say, first of all, follow me on social media because I do post a lot of y'all do, and you see the updates that I post. But I try to keep everyone updated, and especially when one of the things that I'm going to do for you as well is when we have these big meetings coming up. I know this last one, Chairman Harold worked with me, and some of the rest of y'all worked with me on getting the word out about this is what's happening. We need you to email the board. We need people like Bob, maybe even sometimes to come to the board. And so those are things that I'm going to continue to distribute to y'all, just like action items. Like, okay, now we need you to email. I would say sometime between now and September 1st, we need you to email the board and say we want social studies standards that teach factual history, that are free from critical race theory, free from the influence of Islam, and also that teach American exceptionalism in our founding documents. If you email the board with that between now and then, that would be very helpful. SBOE.texas.gov.
Got one back over here. While I'm walking, can we teach the kids how to count back change?
When Trump got in office, there was a lot of talk of doing away with the Department of Education. And I noticed the other day when the Department of Education director was testifying in front of the Senate, her thoughts were to drive the responsibility and accountability down to the states. Right now, does the Department of Education help y'all at all? I mean, other than money, I know they put a lot of money into special education stuff, and it's all needed, but do they have anything that helps you at home to educate our kids?
I would say that I agree with President Trump that we should do away with the Department of Education. I think those things should be filtered back down to the states. Because I think Texas should be on the wayside. I'm happy to see the steps that he's taking in that direction, and they have laid off a lot of the lawyers that were working at the Department of Education. They've gotten rid of a significant number of them. I don't remember what we're up to right now, but a significant number of them. The problem as they try to sort of dismantle it, pass things down to the states, are those funding structures. And so even with higher education, special education, there's a lot of funding that just moves through the federal DOE as a vehicle. And so that's going to take some time, probably, to distribute those things down to the states. And so I'm hoping by the time we can work through all of that and get it phased out. We're talking about the end of President Trump's term, I'm not sure, but I would say people would be surprised how little the Department of Education, what necessary functions it actually has. Because there's not much. If we got rid of it, I think other than the funding vehicles, I think we would pretty much not even notice. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a question about when will we know or how will we know that the new chiefs are operating in our town?
So right now they're on schedule to start being rolled out in the 2030 month coming school year. And so you can expect that all school districts are going to be required to sort of shift over. And it does, you have to, I would like to start them tomorrow. I think that would be great to start them tomorrow. Superintendent who's here would probably, she would definitely disagree. Because you have to, of course, have time to train the teachers. And then, of course, the textbook publishers are going to write textbooks that are based on these standards and align with them. That way the schools can put them into use. And so that process does take a couple of years for them to develop those products. And so we'll see it start to happen in 2030.
Okay, and what about Bluebonnet? We have Bluebonnet math here, but not the reading. How does that work?
So Mrs. Brown asked me about Bluebonnet and sort of how that works. There's two different products. HB 1605 passed by the legislature, so not passed by the SBOE, but the legislature said you need to develop a curriculum that the state of Texas will distribute to school districts. And so far we have ELAR, so English Language Arts, and we have math. And I believe you have math here in Granbury. And so the ELAR product I think is really good as well. And a lot of it is sort of similar to the perspective that we have on the social studies teams and things like that. There's a lot of a good return and then back to phonics. And the K through 5 ELAR that's been approved, I think there's a good return back to cursive writing. And our goal is to make the products more rigorous. We think that's been one of the issues that we have. I don't think anybody could agree that we're doing a great job teaching our students how to read and do math. And so I think the goal is to go back to the basics, back to the fundamentals, phonics, cursive, teaching reading the way that we used to, and I think those things are going to improve. And I think my personal opinion is that Bluebonnet ELAR does a great job of that, going back to some of those basics, and I think it's a really good product. Not perfect, nothing is, but I think it's
How can we encourage our local school boards to engage with parents and community, because they're really...
How can we encourage our school boards, who all may have personal beliefs, be encouraged to support what we are doing in Boston, or that you're doing, because they are up against a secularization, years and generations of non-understanding, and they have to face the community. What can we do to support them in doing what we need to do to help our kids turn this ship?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that question was asked, because I would say the local level is so important, and I think it's been interesting. We always say that the local level is the most important level. We always say that, really the school board might be the most important body in all of politics to be involved in. And I said those things before I got elected to the State Board of Education, but now that I'm at the state level, I really believe it, because the local districts is really where the rubber meets the road, and that's also where you have sort of the biggest impact. And I would say, just like I would tell you with SBOE and with me, we need to hear from you. That's one of the problems that we had at the state. I'm glad Bob came to the state board and helped us with this problem, but for a while we only had leftist activists showing up. And unfortunately, sometimes even Republicans or people who mean well, they're too easily influenced by that, and they're going to go along. Just politicians by their nature. Again, I'm trying to be the best that I can to be a statesman and not a politician. But politicians, by their nature, they respond to pressure, and they respond to whoever's pushing them the hardest in one direction. What I've seen from, all the way from the SBOE to a lot of our school boards is they will hear, a lot of times they'll hear from the left, they'll hear from people who don't want, the Bible to be included in school at all, they'll hear from people who want critical race theory and all those things, and those a lot of times can be the loudest voices that they hear. And so if you want to know how to influence that, how to support them, how to help them, I would say let them hear from you. Right? Show up to those school board meetings, send them emails, and consistently, not just every once in a while, but let them know, just that you're paying attention to what they're doing. And it's always encouraging for me when I see, people are actually watching what I'm doing. I better do the right thing. And so I think it's even more important at the local level. And school board elections are really important. I believe we do. I'm not sure. Are you talking about Granbury or just in the state? I believe so, but let me get back to you. Mrs. Harrell. Mrs. Harrell asked if we use Pearson products for social studies in the state of Texas. I'm not totally positive on that, so I'll get back. Yes, sir, Mr. Lowry.
Thank you for remembering, Brandon. Thank you for coming. One of the questions I have, you talk about curriculum, you talk about textbooks. How are you looking for the future with AI influencing textbooks, materials that kids send out? It seems like it can be tweaked a little bit with the input versus output. So if you could address that.
Yeah, our future county judge over here,
Woohoo!
is a great leader. He asked me about AI. If you didn't hear the question, he asked me about AI and the influence that it has on textbooks. And I'm very concerned. Personally, I'm very concerned in general about the amount of digitization that is happening to our curriculum. Just not even just AI, but just how much time our students spend on screens. I think there's a lot of data that I have seen that shows that, up to a certain point, it can really be harmful. And I'm a really big fan, especially at the elementary level, of pen and paper. I think we need to go back to that a lot.
It works beautifully. It works beautifully.
So, that's one of the things that's one of my priorities on the State Board of Education is just, a lot of that is up to your local districts. But that's one of the things that I do with the SBOE is do everything I can to promote that. And so one of the, we have these, if we approve something through our instructional materials review and approval process, our districts have that financial incentive to actually use that. And so one of the things that I've told all of our publishers is if you come to me with a tier 1 full subject material that is all digital, then I'm going to vote no. I'm not going to vote to incentivize school districts to use that. And so, sometimes I think there can be good uses, sometimes, for digital products and even, sometimes to a limited extent AI, because I think, especially when you look at high school and the older our students get, that they need to graduate with an understanding of how to use technology, how to use computers. AI is going to be a big thing going forward in the future, but I don't think that they should be learning how to read, using AI and all of those things. So I think limited uses, especially as the kids get older, some of it can be good. I think, especially at our younger grades. To me, before 6th grade, they need to be learning with pen and paper. Maybe they could have a keyboarding class or a computer class, but they need to learn how to read and write and do math on pen and paper. And I think AI, though, is coming in a lot. So we see a lot of new products that are coming in using AI. Some of it's really interesting, but obviously with any tool like that, just with the internet in general, you do some really, really good things and some really, really bad things.
That's true.
And so I'm very careful when it comes to AI, and I think we need to be real careful when we let into our schools for sure. Any other final questions before I turn it over to Sharon? Okay, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
So as you said, my name is Tanner Lacoste. Very close, very close. I'm with Penn Paxton's campaign. I've spent a career thus far, 27 years old in politics. I worked in the 45th administration before doing political research on Chinese foreign policy at Fox News. Come on, please. And then eventually went to an investment bank before finding myself drawn back into politics of no energy like it. So I'm still working the same hours, just for a lot less pay, basically. But like Brandon said, there's a lot of issues going on in our education system. For one, the Islamification of local boards. You see, like the CARE group, Muslim Brotherhoods are trying to open segregated communities in North Texas. Ken Paxton was the first one to sue and stop them, so that's no longer happening anymore. And then on the flip side, you have James Talarico, who's saying his faith and belief is equally influenced by Islamic mystics as it is as Christian authors, which is unacceptable in the state of Texas,
That's right.
especially as a Christian themselves.
That's right.
We've also seen Ken Paxton is defending your civil liberties. He sued the Biden administration over 100 times, by far the most of any attorney general in the country. He's prevented medical interventions for minors on transgenders, and on the flip side, we see James Talarico is campaigning over the doctor has successfully completed multiple gender reassignment surgeries outside the state of Texas and is wanting to bring that into the state of Texas. And that is not going to happen. One thing I want to say is the Democrats are pouring $500 million into the state down the line to flip different seats. Ken Paxton is by far the most sought after seat in the nation. It is the most viewed seat in the nation. And it is our job to make sure that they get the worst investment in history, spend $500 million and get a goose egg in return. And one final thing, we were with the governor yesterday up in Sherman, Texas, and he made a great point of that it is not Talrico versus Ken Paxton, it's not conservatives versus Democrats, it is darkness versus light, and it is right here in Hood County and the rural counties of Texas that are being the first to stop the spread of that shadow of the blue skies of our great state. So with that being said, I'll be in the back for any questions. I would love for your support. I'm actually a Hood County local myself, even though I work in East Dallas, so I maybe hit the gas pedal a little too quick to get over here. I was late, but I got here as quick as I could. So please come see me in the back. I'm going to be meeting with the county chairman. We're going to be organizing. We'll keep Hood County completely red. So thank you, everybody.
I put in the paper that I want to keep Texas red too, but that doesn't mean communism.
That's right. Woo!
We need to distinguish that.
Yes.
I have another speaker that I'd like to introduce you to. I think most of you in this room know him. Is Alex Wolf. He has a special announcement for us.
Right. I think some of you guys are ahead of me, but today I announced that I am running for City Council in this state. Most of you know me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex Wolf. I helped the delegates go down to Houston this past time. I've run previously. I'm a local business owner. We've actually expanded recently. We're very excited. I'm a Christian, husband, father, all that good stuff. But I just want to tell you what I believe so that we can get on the same page. The first thing that I believe is transparency in government, including that a government official should never sign an NDA. That transparency includes things like making sure we hold town halls so that you guys know what's coming for you, and you can tell me what your concerns are. Yes, I do. And that also means after action reports. If we make a decision, you should know what the consequences of that are going to be and what that means for you and for your family. I also believe that our government should serve the people. I believe this is a representative government, and I believe that means sometimes you have to say no.
Right.
And the last thing that I believe, guys, is that politicians should keep speeches short. So if you need me, I'll be in the back. Thank you, guys.
We have Wes, there he is, I see you. That's our program for the night, and as usual, we sing in and we sing out. So Wes is going to lead us. God bless America.
You all done me? God bless America, a land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans, white with